Roger Thompson had been driving the same school bus route for 15 years. Oak Ridge, Vermont, was a sleepy little town where everyone knew everyone, and routines were the lifeblood of its community. He had come to love the quiet mornings as he navigated the narrow, winding roads with the kids on board. Over the years, his bus became more than just a vehicle. It was a space where the town's youth laughed, argued, and sometimes even found solace. It was the kind of job that felt both safe and fulfilling, and Roger was proud of it. That morning, however, was different. It started like any other autumn day. The leaves were turning gold and red, and the air had a crispness that hinted at the coming winter. Roger pulled the bus out of the depot, giving a quick wave to Mrs. Jennings, the local librarian, who was walking her dog down the street. As the bus bumped along the familiar route, the children's chatter filled the air, some of them discussing Halloween costumes, others teasing one another about their weekend adventures. "Did you see the new kid, Charlie? I heard he's from Boston," 10-year-old Maggie said from the back of the bus, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Yeah, and he's got a crazy cool skateboard," replied her friend Ben, whose voice was barely heard above the din. Roger chuckled, his hands on the wheel, but then, just a few blocks from the school, something unusual happened. Ahead, in the middle of the road, stood two large police dogs, their eyes locked onto the bus. At first, Roger thought they were just strays or maybe someone's lost pets. But as he got closer, he realized that they weren't moving. They stood there, unwavering, blocking the road completely. "Hey, what the?" Roger muttered, his brow furrowing in confusion. He honked the horn, hoping they would move, but the dogs just stood their ground. He tried swerving around them, but the dogs followed him, positioning themselves at either side of the bus, their movements synchronized like soldiers on patrol. The children on the bus, initially amused, began to grow uneasy. "Mr. Thompson, why are the dogs blocking the bus?" little Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Her small face was pressed against the window, her eyes wide as she stared at the imposing animals. Roger, feeling a twinge of discomfort, shrugged. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. Maybe they're just lost." But deep down, something about this felt off. He could see the muscles in the dogs' legs tense, and their eyes, sharp, focused, never left the bus. Suddenly, a familiar face appeared on the sidewalk. Ms. Evelyn Roberts, the local history teacher, had been walking to the school. She noticed the situation immediately and approached the bus, concern etched on her face. "Roger, those are K9 dogs from the police," she said, her voice low but urgent. "Ajax and Scout, they've been trained for search and rescue, among other things. But this isn't normal behavior. Why are they blocking the bus?" "This isn't like any dog I've seen," Roger replied, his voice tense as he turned to her. "They're not just any dogs. They've been trained to detect all sorts of threats, drugs, explosives, anything dangerous," Ms. Roberts explained, her eyes scanning the dog's behavior. "If they're blocking the bus like this, it's a sign they've sensed something." Roger's stomach churned. "Something like what?" "I'm not sure," Ms. Roberts said, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "But you need to call the sheriff. Something's wrong." The children were silent now, the playful chatter replaced by a nervous tension that filled the bus. Roger, his hands gripping the wheel tighter, picked up the radio and contacted the local sheriff's office. His voice was steady, but his insides were anything but. "Sheriff Walker, this is Roger Thompson on the Oak Ridge school bus route. I've got a problem. 2 police dogs are blocking the road and they won't move. Something's off. Can you send someone out here?" Within minutes, Sheriff Kyle Walker, a man known for his no-nonsense attitude, arrived on the scene with Officer Bethany Young, a K9 officer who worked closely with Ajax and Scout. "Roger, what's going on?" Sheriff Walker asked, stepping out of his patrol car and surveying the scene. Ajax and Scout were still standing firm, their bodies rigid, their eyes focused on the bus. "I don't know, Sheriff. They just showed up and won't let me pass. Ms. Roberts here says they're trained to detect danger, but I don't know what they're after," Roger explained. The sheriff squinted, his hand resting on the handle of his sidearm. "All right, stay in the bus with the kids. We'll take a look." As Officer Young approached Ajax, the dog's body stiffened even more. "They're definitely alerting to something," Officer Young said, her voice tight with concern. "They're in protection mode. We need to clear the area. Something's under that bus." "Under the bus?" Roger repeated, his voice trembling slightly. He'd never felt a sense of fear like this before. "Yes," Officer Young confirmed. "Clear the street, Sheriff. We need to call in the bomb squad." Roger's eyes widened. "Bomb squad? What are you talking about?" "We're not sure yet," Sheriff Walker said, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. "But these dogs don't behave like this unless they're sensing something serious. Get everyone off the bus, now." The children were herded off the bus and into the nearby school building. Roger, his mind racing, tried to keep calm, but his heart was pounding in his chest. He watched as the sheriff and Officer Young called for backup. Within moments, the area was swarming with officers and emergency personnel. The bomb squad arrived, and the investigation began in earnest. Roger stood at the edge of the sidewalk, his hands on his hips, watching the scene unfold. He couldn't help but wonder, what had those dogs sensed? What danger was hidden under his bus? Ms. Roberts approached him, her face pale. "Roger, I think you're about to find out something none of us expected." And then, as the bomb squad carefully inspected the underside of the bus, they found it. A small, sleek device, strangely placed, almost hidden, tucked beneath the vehicle, with a remote trigger. The discovery sent a chill down Roger's spine. The discovery of the suspicious device under the bus had left a heavy silence in the air, one that seemed to hang over the entire town. Roger Thompson stood at the edge of the cordoned-off street, watching as law enforcement and bomb squad members worked quickly and efficiently. His mind raced with questions. Who would do this? Why target his bus, of all things? And most importantly, what was the true purpose of the device? He glanced at the children huddled inside the school, their faces pale and anxious. He felt a pang of guilt. His first responsibility was always to get them to safety, but today, he had failed to protect them. A part of him wished they hadn't been involved in this terrifying ordeal. Sheriff Kyle Walker stood near the scene, speaking quietly into his radio, his face grim. Officer Bethany Young was crouched beside Ajax, the German shepherd, who was still focused intently on the bus, his eyes sharp and unblinking. Scout, the other dog, paced around the area, his nostrils flaring as though he was still trying to catch a scent. After what felt like an eternity, Sheriff Walker approached Roger, his expression serious. "Roger, I know this is all very overwhelming, but we need you to stay calm. We've got the bomb squad handling the device right now. They'll have it disarmed in no time, but I want you to know this is far from over." Roger nodded, his throat dry. "Sheriff, what do you think is going on here? What's this all about?" The sheriff glanced at the bomb squad members, then at Officer Young, who had walked over to join them. "I'm not sure yet," Sheriff Walker said, his voice low. "But those dogs, Ajax and Scout, have been trained for a lot of things, including detecting explosives and other threats. When they acted this way, it was clear they sensed something dangerous. The device under your bus was meant to send a message, Roger. We just don't know who it's for or why." Before Roger could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the scene. It was marked with the insignia of the state police. The doors opened, and two figures emerged, one of them a tall, middle-aged man in a dark suit, the other a woman in a tactical uniform. The woman had a calm but assertive presence as she approached the sheriff. "Walker," she said, giving a brief nod of acknowledgement. "I'm Special Agent Veronica Daniels, with the state police." This is Officer Ryan Holt. We've been briefed on the situation. Glad you're here, Agent Daniels, Sheriff Walker said, stepping aside to allow her to approach the bomb squad. We've got a potential threat. 2K9S detected something under the bus, a device. The squad is working to disarm it, but we need answers fast. Agent Daniels gave a curt nod, then turned to Officer Young, who was still with the dogs. Bethany, let me know if you pick up anything new, she said, her voice steady but full of authority. We'll need every detail on this. The sheriff motioned for Roger to follow him as he led the way to a nearby patrol car, where they could talk privately. As Roger walked beside him, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random act, it was deliberate. Someone had placed that device with a purpose. Roger, Sheriff Walker said as he opened the car door for him, I know this is hard to believe, but we're dealing with something bigger than just a prank. The device wasn't meant to cause immediate harm. It was a warning. We need to figure out who's behind this, and why they chose you. Roger's heart skipped a beat. Me? What do you mean? I don't have any enemies. That's the thing, Roger. We're starting to think this is less about you personally and more about the buses, Sheriff Walker explained, his gaze shifting to the scene behind them. This device, if you look at the placement, it was meant to target a public vehicle. The fact that it was under your bus tells me someone's trying to send a message about the safety of the transportation system. But the buses are safe, Roger protested. I've been driving them for years without issue. What could possibly be wrong with them? Sheriff Walker sighed, his expression tight. That's what we need to figure out. You're not the only one being targeted here. We're going to have to dig into the school district's records, look into who's been involved with the buses. Something doesn't add up. As the sheriff and Roger continued their conversation, a local teacher, Ms. Evelyn Roberts, approached, her face lined with concern. She had been standing off to the side, watching the whole scene unfold. Roger, I've been talking to some of the other staff, she said, lowering her voice. There have been rumors going around for months about issues with the buses. Some people have been whispering about safety concerns, but no one's really done anything about it. I think you might be caught up in something much bigger than we thought. Roger's stomach twisted. Could it be possible that the buses weren't as safe as he thought? He had trusted the system, trusted the maintenance crews who kept everything running smoothly. But now, with the discovery of the device, he was left wondering what he had missed. Ms. Roberts, what are you saying? Roger asked, his voice shaking slightly. Are you suggesting the buses have problems? I'm not sure, Roger, she said, her voice calm but filled with uncertainty. But I've heard murmurs about it, mostly from the teachers. Some parents have voiced concerns as well. It's all been very quiet, but now, with this, it doesn't seem like such a coincidence. As the bomb squad finished their work and carefully removed the device, Agent Daniels stood by, her expression unreadable. After a few moments, she turned to the sheriff and gave him a small nod. It's been disarmed, but we've got a long way to go. We'll need to analyze it back at the lab. The sheriff nodded, his face darkening. All right, we'll keep everyone clear of the area for now. But Roger, I need you to stay available. We might need you for further questioning once we dig deeper into this. Roger nodded, still in shock but now understanding the gravity of the situation. His town, his bus, everything he had known for so long had just changed in an instant. Of course, Sheriff, he said quietly. I just want to make sure the kids are safe. And we'll make sure that happens, Sheriff Walker replied, his voice reassuring but tinged with the weight of what lay ahead. As Roger watched the officers move around the scene, his thoughts turned to the kids. He hadn't fully understood what he was involved in, but now he was starting to realize, the dogs, the device, the whispers of safety concerns, it all pointed to something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. As the hours ticked by, the small town of Oak Ridge found itself at the center of an investigation that was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The initial shock of the morning's events began to wear off, but the tension in the air remained. Roger Thompson stood by the edge of the schoolyard, looking out over the familiar streets of the town he had lived in his entire life. His thoughts kept drifting back to the device found under his bus. The fact that it was meant to be a warning, something he had never imagined would happen in a place like Oakridge, haunted him. Sheriff Kyle Walker had kept him updated, but there were still more questions than answers. The bomb squad had carefully removed the device, but it was only the beginning of the investigation. The device had been remotely triggered, meaning someone had been monitoring the bus for days, maybe even longer. And that person, or group, had gone to extreme lengths to get their message across. "Roger, you doing okay?" It was Ms. Evelyn Roberts again, walking over with a concerned look on her face. Roger sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "I don't know, Evelyn. This whole thing doesn't make sense. Why would anyone want to target a school bus? What could possibly be so dangerous that someone had to plant a device under it?" "I'm not sure," she said softly, glancing over at the officers who were still combing the area. "But I've been hearing things, rumors about the school buses. Some of the teachers have mentioned concerns about safety, but no one's done anything about it." Roger's heart sank. Safety concerns? What kind of concerns? Evelyn hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was listening. There have been murmurs about problems with the bus's maintenance, things like faulty brakes, worn-out parts, even structural issues. But the district's never done anything to address it. It's been brushed aside, almost like they didn't want to deal with it. Roger's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. I've been driving those buses for years. They always seemed fine to me. I've never had a problem with any of them." "I know, Roger. That's what makes this so strange. But someone clearly believes there's a bigger issue. And I think that's what this whole situation is about." Roger felt a lump form in his throat. Was he really this naive? Could the buses he had trusted so much be so unsafe? He had always believed in the system, in the people who maintained the buses, and in the town's commitment to safety. But now, it seemed as if everything was unraveling. And the terrifying part was that he had no idea who or what was behind it. As Roger stood there, lost in thought, a local news crew arrived, setting up their cameras for a live broadcast. The sheriff and Agent Daniels had been giving brief statements to the press, but it was clear that they didn't have many answers. The investigation was still in its early stages, and everything felt like a mystery waiting to be solved. Roger wasn't used to being part of something like this, and the weight of it all felt unbearable. He had spent his whole career as a bus driver, ensuring that the children of Oakridge were safe and sound. But now, that sense of security had been shattered, and the trust he had placed in his community was being questioned. Agent Veronica Daniels walked over to where Roger was standing, her expression focused yet calm. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask you a few questions," she said, her tone professional but not unfriendly. Roger nodded, his mouth dry. "Of course. What do you need to know?" "We're trying to piece together what happened this morning," Agent Daniels began. "The device that was found under your bus, do you recognize anything about it? Have you seen anything unusual recently? Any strange people or vehicles following your bus?" Roger shook his head. "No, nothing like that. Everything seemed normal. I've been driving the same route for years. There's never been anything out of the ordinary." "All right," Agent Daniels said, jotting something down on her notepad. "But there's something we need to consider. Based on what we've discovered, this wasn't just a random act. Someone had a very specific reason for placing that device under your bus. They had been watching your route. And that suggests it's connected to something much bigger than just a single act of vandalism." Roger's mind raced. Could there be someone in town, someone he knew, who was behind this? Who would have the motive to do something so drastic? He felt the weight of the situation bearing down on him, a feeling of unease growing with every passing minute. Do you have any ideas who might be responsible for this? Agent Daniels pressed. Roger took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. Well, there's something I haven't mentioned. A while back, there were rumors about the buses, safety concerns. People were talking about how some of the buses weren't up to code. But nothing ever came of it. I didn't think it was serious enough to raise alarms. Agent Daniels' eyes narrowed. Safety concerns? Could you elaborate on that? Who was talking about this? Roger hesitated, but then he remembered the conversations he'd overheard at the local diner, the quiet murmurs among the teachers and parents. He thought about how his fellow bus drivers had mentioned similar issues, but they'd all dismissed them. It wasn't just one person. It was a few, mostly teachers and parents. But they never made a formal complaint. I guess they figured it would be too much trouble, or that nothing would change. And honestly, I didn't think it was that big a deal. But now, after everything that's happened, maybe it was. Agent Daniels took a moment to process this information, her gaze shifting to the officers who were still investigating the area. All right, we'll look into it. But we need to be careful. If there are people in town who are upset about the bus's safety, or if there's something even deeper going on, this could get complicated. Roger nodded, his heart heavy. What happens now? We continue the investigation, Agent Daniels said firmly. We'll need to interview everyone involved, district officials, the mechanics, anyone who might have knowledge about the buses. But for now, I think you should lay low. Let us handle things from here. As she turned to walk away, Roger couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was at play. The whispers about the buses, the mysterious device under his vehicle, the growing tension in town, it was all starting to piece together in a way he hadn't expected. And he had a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. The investigation continued, but with every new discovery, Oakridge, once a peaceful and tight-knit town, seemed to fracture further. The unease that had begun when the bomb squad arrived had grown into a palpable tension. Whispers turned into full-blown conversations, and every coffee shop meeting, every PTA gathering, seemed to center on one question: how could something like this happen in their town? Roger Thompson felt as though he were living in a fog. He had been thrust into a situation he never could have imagined, and now, with each passing day, the ramifications of that strange morning were becoming clearer. The more the investigation progressed, the more people in Oakridge began to take sides. On one hand, there were those who saw Taylor Reynolds and his father, Harold, as heroes, whistleblowers who had risked everything to expose the corruption and safety issues within the school district. On the other hand, there were those who saw them as criminals, reckless individuals who had endangered the lives of children just to get their message across. The town was split down the middle, and the tension was escalating. Roger, who had always been a simple man focused on his job, found himself caught in the middle. He was grateful that the bomb had been discovered before it caused harm, but the more he learned about the state of the school buses, the more he felt betrayed. He had driven those buses for years without a second thought, trusting that they were safe. But now, it seemed that everything he had trusted was crumbling before his eyes. It was late one afternoon when Roger walked into the local diner. He had hoped for a quiet cup of coffee, a brief respite from the chaos that had taken over his life. But as soon as he stepped through the door, the noise in the room seemed to die down. People were staring at him. Whispers filled the air. Well, if it isn't the man of the hour," a gruff voice called from the back of the diner. It was Carl Fitzgerald, the former transportation director for the Oakridge School District. The man who had dismissed the safety concerns, the one whose actions, or inactions, had led to this entire mess. He was sitting with a few other men, all with serious expressions on their faces. Roger felt his stomach turn. "What do you want, Fitzgerald?" Carl smirked, his eyes narrowing. "I don't want anything, Roger. I just wanted to say you're a bit late to the party, don't you think? These safety issues have been going on for years. And now, look at you. Playing the hero, acting like you didn't know a thing. Roger clenched his fists. Don't you dare blame me for this, Carl. I had no idea about any of this. And you, he cut himself off, taking a deep breath to steady himself. You should have done something. You were in charge. You were supposed to protect the kids. Carl chuckled darkly. Protect them? From what? All these little rumors about faulty brakes and cracked frames? You think I had time to deal with that? The buses were fine. But now? Now, people are jumping on the bandwagon, claiming they knew all along. I just hope they can live with themselves when they realize it's too little, too late. Roger's anger flared. You don't care about the kids, do you? It's always about money, isn't it? You cut corners, and now we're all paying the price. At that moment, a voice broke in from the front of the diner. It was Ms. Evelyn Roberts, standing at the door, her expression one of barely contained frustration. Enough, Carl, she said firmly. You're not going to blame anyone else for your own negligence. The room grew silent. Roger's heart skipped a beat as he looked at Ms. Roberts, who had been one of the few people who had spoken out about the buses. He could see the fire in her eyes. This was more than just about safety now. It was personal. Carl's face reddened, but he didn't reply. He simply turned his attention back to his coffee, muttering under his breath. The silence in the diner was suffocating, but it was clear that the division in Oakridge was only growing stronger. People were taking sides, and not just about the buses. This was about trust, loyalty, and betrayal. Later that evening, Roger found himself alone in his kitchen, the lights dim and the room quiet. He thought about the conversation at the diner. How had Oakridge, a town that had always been a place of comfort, become a battleground? He had always been a simple man, never concerned with politics or complicated issues. But now, everything felt like a tangled mess of emotions and accusations. The doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Sheriff Kyle Walker standing on his doorstep, his face tight with concern. Roger, we need to talk, Sheriff Walker said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Roger frowned. About what? The investigation, the sheriff replied, his voice serious. It's taking a new turn. We've got more information about Taylor and Harold Reynolds. I think you should know what we're dealing with. Roger felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? What's going on? Sheriff Walker leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. We've confirmed that the Reynolds family wasn't just concerned about the buses. This goes deeper than that. Taylor, he wasn't just trying to expose safety issues. There's something else. Something we don't know yet. Roger's head spun. What are you saying, Sheriff? What's Taylor hiding? Sheriff Walker hesitated, then spoke in a low, measured tone. Taylor's got a connection to someone we've been tracking for a while. Someone with ties to criminal activity. And that connection might have something to do with the device that was placed under your bus. Roger stared at the sheriff, his mind racing. Are you telling me that Taylor Reynolds was involved in something illegal? The sheriff's eyes darkened. I don't know yet. But we're going to find out. I just wanted you to be prepared. There's more to this than we realized. The morning fog had settled over Oakridge, casting an eerie stillness over the town. Roger Thompson woke up to a heavy feeling in his chest, the weight of the previous day's events pressing down on him. It had been a week since the bomb scare on his bus, and things in Oakridge had only gotten worse. What started as an unsettling mystery had quickly spiraled into a full-blown investigation, with more questions than answers. And now, with Sheriff Walker's latest revelation about Taylor Reynolds' involvement, Roger wasn't sure who he could trust anymore. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, but it tasted bitter in his mouth. He could hear the faint murmur of voices outside his window. The town had split. Some people still believed in Taylor and Harold Reynolds, seeing them as whistleblowers. Others, like Carl Fitzgerald, saw them as reckless criminals who had put everyone at risk for a cause that wasn't their own. Roger felt trapped between the two sides, neither fully fitting into either. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock on the door. Sheriff Walker stood on the other side, his face more somber than usual. "Roger, we need to talk," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Roger nodded, his stomach sinking. "About what? Is there more news?" Sheriff Walker didn't waste any time. "We've been digging into Taylor Reynolds and his father, Harold. I told you there was something else going on, and I wasn't wrong. We've uncovered some disturbing connections." Roger felt his pulse quicken. "What do you mean? What's going on?" The sheriff took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the room before he spoke. "Taylor's been involved with a group we've been tracking for a while. A group that's been causing problems, money laundering, theft, even organized crime. Harold Reynolds was an unwitting part of it, but Taylor knew what he was doing. And the device he planted under your bus? That wasn't just about the buses. It was a signal. A warning." Roger's mind was reeling. "Wait, you're telling me Taylor Reynolds was involved in criminal activity all along?" Sheriff Walker nodded gravely. "We've traced the device back to a series of incidents linked to this group. They've been using these distractions, things like the faulty buses and the bomb scare, to cover up their real plans. Taylor thought he could use the safety concerns to manipulate the situation and draw attention away from their activities. But when the device went off, we started connecting the dots." Roger could barely process the words coming out of the sheriff's mouth. "But why? Why go to all this trouble? What's he after?" Sheriff Walker paused, then answered with a quiet intensity. "Money. Power. Whatever it is, it's bigger than just buses and safety. Taylor's been playing a dangerous game, and it's only just beginning to unravel." Roger felt sick. He had trusted Taylor, he had been ready to believe that Taylor and his father were trying to do the right thing by exposing the flaws in the bus system. But now it seemed everything was a lie, an elaborate scheme that had put so many lives at risk. "But there's more," Sheriff Walker continued, "and it's important you know this. The device you found on the bus wasn't designed to cause mass harm, but it was meant to send a message. It was the last part of Taylor's plan to distract the authorities while they carried out something else, something far more sinister." Roger felt the room spin. "What do you mean? What else could be going on?" Sheriff Walker's face hardened. "We believe the group Taylor's involved with is planning something even worse. We're still working to uncover all the details, but it's clear now that the safety concerns, the bomb scare, it was all part of a much bigger plot." Roger looked at the sheriff, his mind racing. "What do we do now?" "We stop them," Sheriff Walker said, his voice filled with resolve. "We bring everything to light. And we make sure no one else gets hurt." The next few days were a blur. The sheriff, Agent Daniels, and a team of state police launched a full-scale operation to bring down the criminal group Taylor Reynolds had been associated with. Roger stayed out of the way, watching as Oakridge became the center of a much larger investigation. He couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal, but there was also a deep sense of responsibility. He had driven those buses for years, and now he had a chance to make things right. As the investigation progressed, the authorities were able to trace the group's movements, uncover their financial transactions, and shut down their illegal operations. Taylor Reynolds was arrested, along with several other members of the group. The fallout was swift, Oakridge was rocked by the truth, and the town's perception of Taylor and his family was forever changed. But in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Roger received a letter in the mail, handwritten, and with no return address. He opened it cautiously, wondering what it could be. Inside was a short note. "Roger. I did what I had to do. Not for me, but for all of us. You were right to trust your instincts. Thank you for everything. Taylor." Roger's heart sank as he read the words. Was Taylor truly sorry? Or was this just another manipulation? The letter didn't provide answers, but it did give him something to think about. No matter what Taylor's intentions had been, he had changed everything for Oakridge, sometimes in ways that couldn't be undone. In the weeks that followed, Roger found himself back behind the wheel of the school bus, the routine returning in a way that felt both comforting and bittersweet. The town of Oakridge was healing, slowly but surely. The buses had been inspected, repaired, and brought up to code, ensuring that no child would ever be put at risk again. The sheriff had been right, justice had been served. But Oakridge, like any town that had faced something this big, would never be the same. The shadows of the past still lingered, and the scars of betrayal would take time to fade. As Roger drove his route, his thoughts turned to the children who relied on him to get them safely to and from school. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could make sure it never happened again. And in that, he found a small sense of peace. The story closes with a reflection on the importance of trust, the consequences of standing up for what's right, and the ongoing struggle between personal integrity and the forces of corruption. Roger, despite all the turmoil, had emerged as an unexpected hero, one who had done his part in exposing the truth, protecting his community, and ensuring the safety of the children he had always cared for. This story highlights the importance of trust, accountability, and the impact of standing up for what's right. It explores the consequences of negligence, the complexity of human choices, and how one person's actions can affect an entire community. The character's journey demonstrates the delicate balance between being a whistleblower and a criminal, with a focus on how difficult situations can lead to unexpected heroism and profound change. The story conveys a powerful message about the importance of integrity, courage, and perseverance. It reminds us that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, can lead to justice and safety for others. It also underscores the idea that sometimes the path to healing and improvement involves uncomfortable truths and difficult choices. We invite you to share your thoughts and feelings about this story by liking the video, commenting below, and sharing your reactions with others. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on more meaningful stories like this. Your interactions are an immense encouragement to keep creating and sharing content that matters. Once again, thank you so much for watching and being a part of this journey. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more inspiring stories. Stay tuned, and take care.